welcome to the Verona Senior Center. I'm Elisa Weiss. I'm the program manager here. So all the stuff that you see that happens in this newsletter, that's a big part of my job. So if there are more things that you want to see, let me know. If you have ideas, send them my way. I may be the person that puts this together, but that doesn't mean I have all the ideas in the back of my head. So anyways, I want to introduce our presentation for today. Today it's called One Rep Max Living Concept. We're going to join physical therapists Michelle and Kristen from Forward Physical Therapy to learn about one repetition maximum living. What is it? How do we identify it? How does it impact your quality of life? For today, you will have the opportunity to get your grip strength tested. Have any of you ever done that? Had your grip strength tested?
Yes.
Maybe a while ago? Good. And then you also learn how to slow age-related changes and improve quality of life as an older adult. Well, holy cow, we're going to learn a lot today, aren't we? So on that note, let's welcome our physical therapists today.
Oh, and if you have cell phones, make sure you put them on silent, okay? Just to respect the presenters. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. We're very excited to talk to you today about One Rep Max Living. If anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to raise your hand. We'd love, some engagement, some questions, whatever you've got for us. Okay, so a lot of you probably haven't heard of One Rep Max Living, so we're going to talk about that today and what it is, how can we identify it, and what can we do about it moving forward, and how can we best set you up for success moving forward. Who are we? I'm Michelle. I am a physical therapist. This is Kristen, also a physical therapist. Kristen's the owner of Forward Physical Therapy, and I work at our Fitchburg location over off of McKee. And as physical therapists, we treat anywhere from just your regular aches and pains, low back pain, shoulder pain, to post-operative care from a total knee, total shoulder, or rotator cuff repair, something like that. We also treat, if you say you guys have awesome new pickleball courts, maybe you guys have an injury from playing pickleball, or you're wanting to get back to pickleball, but you're not so sure about it. Maybe balance is an issue, or you have a lingering injury. And then we also treat kind of what we're going to talk about today, which is setting you up for success and building strength, endurance, and functional capacity for the rest of your life. So let's start with some age-related changes. So as we get older, what happens is your cell growth starts to decrease, okay? You have this cell breakdown that is greater than your cell repair. This happens in your bones, it happens in your muscles, in your organs, and over time, this just reduces your function. And so this happens in multiple systems. It's not a one system. We have our cardiovascular system, neurologic system, we've got pulmonary, musculoskeletal, which is what we're gonna focus our time on today as physical therapists. But with the musculoskeletal system, we're looking at potential to get sarcopenia, which is an increase in muscle loss, and osteoporosis, arthritis, frailty, things like that, okay? But there's also accelerators to this aging process. So there's things that can make that happen faster, which is what we don't want to happen. So physical inactivity or being sedentary can increase this. Also having extra fat, specifically in visceral area or your abdominal area, and then just having a history of chronic disease can also progress this. So, One Rep Max Living. Let's talk a little bit about what is it, okay? So let's look at our lovely individual here. Let's call her Dorothy, okay? Dorothy has some low back pain that she's been kind of dealing with. It bugs her a little bit. She's not really super active. She never really has been. And she's got to get up and do her laundry today. So when we look at Dorothy's ability to pick something up off of the floor and stand up is limited. So she can, for one rep, she can lift 15 pounds up off the ground. We call this a deadlift, being able to pick something up off the ground and stand it up, okay? She can do 15 pounds, and that is the maximum amount that she can lift off the floor, okay? Her laundry basket, she's got a lot of laundry, it's 14 pounds, okay? So every time she's doing the laundry, she has to pick up her laundry basket from the floor, and she is almost at her maximum capacity. And so doing the laundry, which is something that all of us have to do, is setting her up for, being super tired and exhausted, when if it were maybe 50% of her 1 rep max, it wouldn't be a big deal. So if we look at this graph here, in the dark blue, we have her deadlift max. 15 pounds is the most that she can lift. And then the laundry basket is 14 pounds, pretty dang close. So that's what we deem 1 rep max living. It's where demands of life are near or exceeding your maximum capacity or your 1 rep max, okay? This is you.
So far, does that concept make sense? Okay. What Michelle is describing is someone who has low physical resilience. So Dorothy is not a very resilient human at the moment. When we talk about resilience, I'm getting used to using the microphone, so let me know if you have a hard time hearing me. Resilience is a characteristic that determines one's ability to resist or recover from any individual health stressor. So this line on the graph is a little thin, but if you look at, we're just looking at, this is Dorothy's trajectory towards death. Sounds doom and gloom, but we'll paint a much prettier picture here shortly. Each one of these dips in the graph is some sort of health stressor that Dorothy has sustained. So that could be a loss of a loved one. That could be a cardiovascular event, a TIA, or a stroke. That could be an illness, say COVID, just getting any sort of sickness. And each time, Dorothy is not recovering back to her baseline. She is kind of dipping closer and closer to being able to recover less, which also kind of decreases her ability to perform the demands of her daily living activities. So our goal as physical therapists is to look at individuals in front of us, or at least hopefully identify these folks prior to someone getting close to this line. So this red line describes any demand of your daily activity. Dorothy is eking pretty darn close to that. So how can we, as physical therapists, guide you or guide individuals that are getting close to that line as far away from that line as possible? And Michelle has already talked about, we have all these age-related changes that are unavoidable. But even being an aging adult or an older adult doesn't mean that we can't make gains and get individuals back to these higher bumps in the graph. But Dorothy currently is a very low physically resilient human being. So how do we identify it? How can we tell if someone is living close to their 1 rep max, or what do their demands of their daily living look like? If you kind of reflect on what you have to do day over day, the things that you consistently perform, and how challenging they are, you might be living at your 1 rep max currently, or you might know someone who's living 1 rep max living. The goal is, again, getting people as far away from this line as possible so that your 1 rep max is maybe 30, 50, 70 pounds from an ability to lift from the floor, so that your laundry basket, which is 14 pounds, which is quite heavy, by the way, is not so much of a burden physically on you, and that can still set you up for success the rest of the day, where laundry isn't the hardest thing that you have to do that day. We like to look at vital signs as a way to kind of identify these things. We go to the doctor. Vital signs
at your physician look like this. So what's very typical is that we take pulse rate, temperature, blood pressure, height, weight. Those are the things that kind of give us a good idea of an individual's essential bodily functions. But what's really missing the boat here is physical performance and function. I'm sure you all get your Medicare well checks and they ask you how many times you've fallen in the last year, what you've done about it, that sort of thing, whether we want to be honest about those things or not. It doesn't help paint a really good picture about how you're physically performing as an individual. So as PTs, we've kind of added this movement vital sign list. And we are all going to get an opportunity to practice some of these together today. And Michelle's going to take a deep dive into what these look like. But what movement vital signs tell us, how is this person walking? What does your gait speed or your walking speed look like? Can you cross this street in the time it takes for the blinking timer to go away, or are you still in the middle of that crosswalk? The timed up and go where we stand up, walk out 10 feet and come back and sit down as quickly and as safely as possible. What does that look like compared to your age-matched peers? Also, grip strength. And I'm kind of stealing a little bit of Michelle's thunder, I'm really sorry. Grip strength, and Michelle will talk about how that relates to mortality. And also the 30-second chair stand test. So 2 of these things we're gonna go together. It will be voluntary today, but to see kind of where you stand from a physical performance standpoint.
Okay, so gait or walking speed first. Basically, we can calculate how fast you walk on a regular basis. So looking at this here, we have kind of this cutoff score. And if you walk slower than 2.2 miles an hour, then you are at an increased risk to be dependent in your activities of daily living or needing a caregiver or help with your activities of daily living. You're more likely to be hospitalized. You're more likely to have to use a walker or an assisted device, and you're more likely to have an adverse event like a fall, okay? On the other hand, we have this kind of protective speed almost, where if you are 3.1 miles an hour or faster, then that puts you independent in your activities of daily living, able to live on your own independently. You are less likely to be hospitalized, less likely to have an adverse event like a fall, and you are more likely to be a community ambulator, not have to need an assisted device and things like that, okay? So that's why gait speed is important. Timed up and go, Kristen. Sorry, it's blurry. Shoot. Okay, timed up and go. Basically, Kristen said, you start in a chair. On our mark, you stand up and walk 10 feet around a cone and back as fast as you can and as safely as you can. And there's a cutoff score of about 13.5 seconds. If you are slower than this, or it takes you increased time to complete this task, you're at an increased falls risk. And so it also puts you at higher risk for some chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease and mortality. So next we have grip strength. And there has been a lot of research on grip strength and its association with health outcomes. And what this means is basically a higher grip strength is associated with a lower risk of all-cause mortality or mortality from cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, COPD, and all cancer types. I said that slow because it's really crazy, okay? Now, there are cutoff scores again for this. If you are a male and you have less than 26 kilos in your grip strength, which is about 57 pounds, and for women, less than 16, which is about 35 pounds. And that would put you at an increased risk for these things. So we actually have a handheld grip dynamometer that we brought today. So after the presentation, if you're interested to know where your grip strength falls for your age and gender, we can absolutely do that and kind of let you know if you're at below average or low, or if you're above average or in an elite category for your age and for your grip strength, okay? And then lastly, we have the 30-second chair stand test. Now, this one I'd like to do as a group if you feel safe and feel comfortable doing so. Ideally, we're doing this within a chair that's up against the wall, and with a chair that doesn't have wheels on it. And I think pretty much everyone has chairs that don't have wheels. So if you feel comfortable doing this and you want to participate, please do it along with us. So basically what this is it's identifying how many times can you stand up and sit down in a 30-second time frame. So what this looks like, and I want to just show you so we're all doing the repetitions correctly. You are to not use your hands if possible, okay? So arms across your chest, and when I say go, we will all stand up and fully extend the hips and then come back down. I don't want to see reps where you're not standing up all the way. That doesn't count as a full rep. So you're going as fast as you can and doing as many reps as you can in 30 seconds, okay? This might get tiring for people, but the reason why, it gives us a good idea of where you're at strength-wise, endurance-wise, maybe cardiovascularly it's challenging for you. You'd be surprised after 30 seconds, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of tired. Like, I wasn't expecting that. But we have a chart up here. This one's for women specifically. We can also show one for men if you're interested on where you stand. But for your age range, you have kind of these norms where you should be. And if you are less than this range, then you're at an increased falls risk. Not only that, but it again tells us, if you have decreased, muscle strength or potentially endurance issue or cardiovascular issue as well. Okay, so I will get a timer out if everyone wants to kind of pull your chairs away from the table. If you can, we're trying to do this without using your arms. If anyone would like, me to stand by them or to have some assistance if they're nervous about it, just please let me know, okay? Anybody want a spotter? All right, anybody else? Okay, let me get my timer ready. And you can all scoot towards the edge of your chair so it makes it a little bit easier for you to stand up, sit down, okay? And make sure that we're fully extending those hips at the top, no half reps, okay? And everyone will count yourself how many reps you get, okay? Ready, set, go. Halfway there.
Woo! The lights are burning.
Keep it up. Good job, everyone. Almost there. Couple more reps in, 5 seconds. And stop. Okay, great. Nice job, everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. Love that. So that might give you a little bit of insight as to kind of where you fall. Do you have a? Yeah. Kristen will get the men's score up as well, but this chart is for women, and then we can try to get the men. There we go. Men are here. There we go. Lovely. So you can kind of see where you were. Were you inside that range? Were you outside that range? Were you way above that range? Awesome if you were. If you weren't, then we maybe have some stuff that we can work on. Again, we're using these things to try and identify how close are we to this threshold of our demands of activity. Are we close to this? Are we performing kind of, maybe we're right on the border. Maybe you got, maybe you're 70 years old and you got 10 reps. So you're in there technically, but you're right on the border. And so, these are some things that we can start to work on to make sure that you don't start to decline in terms of your function, okay? Okay, so now moving on with what can we do about it? I'm sorry, that's bugging me. There we go. Okay, so back to this old chart we've got here, this little graph. Basically, we are, like I said, we're trying to stay above this line. We're trying to not even come close to this line for as long as we can, potentially our majority or all of our life. So if you're thinking, okay, well, I need to maybe start exercising, or maybe I do some exercise classes, that is great. And I don't want to pick too much on the chair exercise classes, because there are benefits to it and some people it may be appropriate for. But I think as you get to be 65 and older, you are grouped together into this older adult category. You are now elderly, right? Congratulations. And so you have these classes that are older adult classes, right? And you go into these classes no matter what your fitness level is, no matter what your history is, how active you are as an individual. They're all, some of them look like this, and you're doing the same movements as everybody else. There's no changes. And like I said, maybe this is appropriate for some of you, but it's not appropriate for all of you. And this may not be challenging enough or enough of a stimulus to make a change in your function, in your strength, in your endurance, in your cardiovascular health, okay? And we've seen in the research again and again that yes, we need, the daily recommended exercise should be, or the weekly exercise recommendations should be 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous cardiovascular exercise, or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise cardiovascularly. But not only that, is we should also be adding in resistance training and trying to lift some weights, lift heavy things, make things challenging for your muscles as well to help improve and combat some of these age-related changes that we've talked about, okay?
These time limits that you have there, 75 and 150, is that a day? A week?
No, that's in a week, yep. So 150 of light to moderate, 150 of moderate to vigorous, or 75 minutes if it's more intense and it's more vigorous per week, okay? Yeah, per day, that would be crazy. I don't even do that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about 3 different individuals that are the same age, but their lifespan and their graphs are going to look quite a bit different, okay? So first, go ahead and move to the next one, Kristen. First guy we're going to talk about is Ron, okay? Ron is 82, just like the others, but Ron doesn't really exercise. He doesn't do a whole lot, and he's never been a fitness guy, and he is now using a walker, and you can see his graph looks very similar to the graph that we have talked about over and over again, right? Where maybe we're getting to this point now where he gets below his threshold, his critical threshold for his daily demand. And he's now living the last 10, 20 years of his life where he's below this threshold and he needs help with his daily activities. He is not able to go out into the community. He can't pick his grandkids up off the floor. And that kind of stinks, right? So now let's look at Betty. Betty's awesome, right? Betty has started some strength training. Betty started maybe when she was 50, 60. She started some strength training and she is built to be able to lift some pretty heavy weights, okay? This is 100 pounds. That's awesome, right? Look at her. That's a deadlift right there. And so because of this, because she does 2 to 3 days a week of resistance training, her graph looks a little bit different. We've got a more rounded graph where she is above the threshold and doesn't get to below the threshold until towards that really way late end in her life, okay? And so that's kind of more of the graph that we want to see, that we want to be, functioning at. Now, on the other hand, we've also got Joe. This is Joe. Joe is a runner. He's really big into cardiovascular fitness. He loves to run. He goes for walks all the time. He plays some pickleball too. And his graph even looks a little bit different than Betty's in that he has been able to sustain high function, high level all the way until the very end of his life where he dips down below. And I know this is death, right? And so our goal is we're trying to live long, die fast, right? That's what we want. We don't want to have the last 20 years of our life where we're below this threshold and we can't do the things that we want to do and we can't function the way that we want to, okay?
So how do we do it? How do we avoid 1 rep max living? And I think it is a lot easier for Michelle and myself to stand up in our third and fourth decade of our lives to know that we have not experienced all of the things that you all have experienced or are currently going through or may experience in the next couple of decades of your life. We are more so here to say we've seen a lot of individuals never have fitness background and decide to make that change in their fifth, sixth, seventh decade of life, and we know and we've seen it before our eyes, and it's very exciting to see like we can make really positive changes. And we're not here to say or sell anything that is like we are going to take years off or add years to your life that's like and avoid the aging process. We want to embrace it and go into it headstrong, into the storm, knowing that there's going to be some bumps in the road, but how do we limit the impact it has on us and our final years of life? So how do we avoid that one rep max living? And a lot of it is starting with what's called a risk reframe of we look at, especially in the healthcare field, at the older and just kind of societally at older adults as a way to take things off of your plate. Look at individuals as older adults as fragile or needing some extra help, which a lot of times can be the case. We also then say, well, you should be doing less. And again, we are not here to say that seated chair exercises are not beneficial. They 100% can be a really great starting point or an end point for someone. But the risk in keeping someone here and doing less is much higher. So if we often think about what is the risk of putting a 35-pound kettlebell in front of Dorothy? What's going to happen? She's never lifted this much before in her life. We think about like, ooh, lifting weights, that seems a little risky, not very safe. But we need to think about what is the risk if we don't. We have the potential to change Dorothy's trajectory towards the end of her life by getting her stronger, helping her build bone density, and improving her functional independence. We often look at older adults and try to find ways to maximize your safety. And we look at exercises like deadlifts as dangerous exercises when really they have the highest potential to make a positive change in your life. This is not my quote, but I wish it was. If you think lifting is dangerous, try being weak. Being weak is dangerous. And then we want to look at, okay, so where do I start? How am I supposed to do this? Know that the needs of an Olympic athlete are no different than the needs of my grandmother. They just look a little bit different. We all need to be able to get in and out of a chair. To an Olympian, that might be a squat. We all need to be able to get on and off the floor, whether it is recovering from a fall, getting on the floor with your grandkids, playing with your dog, and to someone like Michelle, that would be a burpee, where she intentionally falls to the ground and gets back up for fitness and fun. So those needs differ by degree, but not kind. We all need to be able to do the same functional activities throughout our life. So how do we scale those things? It could be volume. So think of the amount of sets or reps, or if you're currently in a group fitness class, and you might not be able to do as much as the person sitting next to you. Great. We can scale the reps down a little bit and do that a little bit differently. We can change the load. So whether that is the amount of weight in your hand or the position. I have no current physical ailments, so I can squat this low. But someone else's squat might be to a 20-inch box. It is the same exact movement. We just need to start somewhere different. Modifying range of motion, and then modifying speed. We can move slow, we can move fast. We can make things harder by doing each of those things depending on what that activity is. And then finally, probably one of the most beneficial things is fitnessing with friends. There, especially during COVID, we looked at the very young people who are not getting the socialization in schools. This has become a huge problem for that age group. But then we also look at older adults. Those two generations were the ones, especially during COVID, that saw the greatest social isolation. And we're starting to see that that has become a big problem. Thankfully, we're all hopefully past that for good. But when we look at the ability to be around people and exercise in groups, that has a much higher adherence rate, and it's way more fun to exercise with friends versus doing it on your own. It creates a greater sense of belonging and offers a very supportive nature. And we know that if Dorothy is going to be asking Ron if he's showing up to the class the next day, Ron's more likely to show up if someone asks, versus him just being on his own doing a list of exercise given to him by a physical therapist 30 years ago. These two pictures are of two different gyms. This one here is actually a high-intensity interval training gym specifically targeted towards individuals who are 50 and older. If you're younger than 50, you are not allowed. But they are doing the things day in and day out and as a group, and it looks pretty fun. This is Michelle's gym. All of these individuals in their like second, third, and fourth decade of life, but more so as a way, these two groups' exercises might look slightly different based on individual abilities, but they're all doing the same thing week over week. With that, it's more of how do we, make sure that we're identifying kind of what's going on from your physical independence standpoint, and how do we change that? The testing that Michelle went over are more like a group of things that we would do within a session to say, this is your group strength, not so great, but everything else is looking pretty good. So let's try to shore up some of those weaknesses. How do we set you up for the best success in those last decades of life to make sure you're able to do the things that you want to do and continue to do? And then with that, making sure that we're doing that consistently, looking at exercise and reframing that risk. Like, what is the risk of picking up a weight from the floor to get stronger with the potential of maybe getting a little bit of muscle soreness here and there versus doing consistent exercise over time that doesn't challenge you. And then trying to get all of that under one roof or with friends is going to have maximum benefit. We'd like to thank you for your time and hanging out with us this morning. Our plan, we have 2 grip strength dynamometers here, which is just going to test grip strength. If you want to do that, Michelle and I are going to stick around obviously for questions as well. If you want to get your grip strength tested, we're going to ask you your date of birth, and then we'll enter some data into the computer and kind of spit out where you lie amongst percentiles amongst your sex and your age group. But with that, before we kind of move, what questions do you have for us?
So,
Yeah.
how do you get, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
how do you get evaluated for this?
So when it comes to, depending on what your insurance is, so this is something that is covered under as a Medicare benefit. Obviously, like costs may look different if you have an Advantage plan versus straight Medicare in your secondary. But these are all kind of tests that we can do that is grouped under insurance to kind of, again, see where you are and where you should be, and then to be able to create a plan for you or make recommendations based on that information. So if it's something too that you're interested, like I would really love to see kind of where I'm at, I'd like to schedule an appointment. We can do that today towards the end. We have business cards as well. But this is all something that as physical therapists, we're all trained to do, and we kind of set that up as, how do we get all of these tests and measures based on what your specific goals are, and then how do we create a plan together to get you there? Does that answer your question?
So I'm just wondering about all your stuff. If you have arthritis in your hips, those are going to be limiting factors that you really don't have control over as far as your physical mobility, walking fast and all those things.
For sure, and so that's where we come in. And if you do have, arthritis or you have areas of pain, like that's our jam, right? Like that's where we can focus on, okay, where are you limited? So maybe you're limited in these areas because of pain. Okay, then we need to try to get pain levels down. And how do we do that? Maybe we see that you have weaknesses in certain areas, or there's different things that we can look at and identify. And that's also a thing that we can focus on in a session is, okay, I'm having pain in my hip and it's limiting me with a lot of these things. Great. Then let's focus on getting your pain levels down by strengthening. Maybe we do some manual work on your hip, whatever it takes to get you to be able to tolerate those activities so that we can then maybe test them or retest them. And, oh, now I don't really have pain with that. And then that's an improvement, right? So that's kind of where we can go from there as well. If you do have pain, like we can address that pain areas. And there is actually something that we can do about it. If you have hip pain, shoulder pain, back pain, like you don't necessarily have to live with that. We can look at that and address it.
And then I have to ask what about neuropathies that you have, the peripheral neuropathies?
Yeah. So that's definitely a limiting factor for sure. And I treat patients right now that have bilateral peripheral neuropathy in both legs, and it really limits them. And our sessions are really focused on making sure that we are focusing on balance and function and making sure that, if that's you and you have a really hard time walking, maybe you have to use a walker or an assistive device, right? But then our focus is going to be on, okay, like we're probably going to have some falls at some point in your life. And so how can we make sure that this fall is not a broken bone, that it's a bump, a bruise, that you're able to get off the floor independently, even though you have neuropathy, and making sure that we can work other systems of balance. Balance is not just your feeling in your legs and feet, right? You've got your vision, you have proprioception, your inner ear that works, vestibular system. And so if that proprioception is out and you can't really feel, then we can really work on trying to get those other systems working a little bit better so that, balance isn't so much of an issue, or we can kind of compensate for the neuropathy. We just kind of tailor our sessions based on that and make sure that we're getting you to function at the highest capacity for whatever the issue is that you're having. Yes.
Any comments on grip strength progression? How do you develop that?
Yeah, I mean, anything that includes lifting weights, right? If we're focusing on farmer carry, say you pick up a weight and we're walking with that, that's going to improve your grip strength. There's tons of different types of grip that we can work on. Any kind of any lifting, or even the deadlifting, you have to pick up the weight and hold it with your hands. And so the stronger you get there, the stronger your grip is also going to be. So there's tons of different ways. It doesn't have to be just gripping something and holding onto it. We can work on, like I said, farmer carry. We're walking down and back. We're working on trying to increase how long you're able to hold that. We're working on picking things up off the floor. We're working on bringing things to your shoulders, things like that. All of that is going to increase your grip strength and your overall strength and function too.
Everything I've heard, that people go to physical therapy and then they don't do the activities. And, so going forward, you have to learn how to maintain your own exercise and training, I assume. But do you ever have a way to deal with people like that? Or follow up in some way?
So we always, on our team, if we can't find one or two to three things for our patients that they want to do, that they see the benefit in it, I put the fault on the therapist. I think it's really easy for healthcare providers to say, my patient's not compliant, they're not doing their homework. Or it's like, well, maybe we didn't do our due diligence to make sure it means something to you, or it's accessible enough to you. So some of that is having the conversation to make sure it's something that you see the value in. We would be lying up front here to say oh, we
we never not exercise. We exercise 7 days a week. We do all the things. When we rehab our own injuries, we're very consistent. So we're human, right? So some of it's like, how do we get you to be the most consistent as possible? And I think some of that, the biggest part of that starts with the relationship that you have with your PT. Then it is, how do we do this in the bare minimum way to keep those gains? And really, when we look at resistance training, it's 1 to 2 times a week. It doesn't have to be 1 hour a week or 1 hour a session for 3 to 4 days a week. It's 1 to 2 times a week is where we can see some really positive benefits for resistance training. Can we do more? Yes, but if we're looking at bare minimum, that's it. Biggest thing is staying as active as you possibly can across the lifespan. And then a little bit of a kind of a plug to, we are going to be starting a resistance training class for individuals 55 and older this fall out of our location on Nesbitt, but that is where we get individuals who, we run a class in Edgerton right now, but we have people deadlift. We trialed some jump rope a couple times here and there, but getting into or finding ways that you enjoy as well. So, and it might be a 50-pound dumbbell for one person, and it might just be, I'm gonna load up rocks into my Home Depot 5-gallon bucket, and that is gonna be my deadlift weight, my carry weight, that sort of thing. So some of it is having a provider or a personal trainer or whomever that can help identify, how do we get this to be the most accessible thing for you that you're gonna consistently do over time. Does it answer your question? Sorry, guys.
I find it interesting about the vital signs that you mentioned when you go to the doctor's office, you get your blood pressure, your cardiac rhythm done, and that's about it. These strike me as some add-ons that could easily be done, 1 or 2 of them could actually be done in the doctor's office. Why are we not seeing them in the doctor's office?
I love that question. I think the easy answer would be they don't have time, but I think a lot of it is not within their expertise to do the movement examinations versus looking at how do we look at vital, and if we really look at a primary care physician's role, it is how do we identify any problems within your medical systems? Do we treat that with drugs or lifestyle interventions? And we're gonna do some screening, so that's like filling out your fall questionnaire and all those other things. And it's more of like, is this person treatable just within this 10 to 15 minute wellness check, or do we need to refer out to specialties? I would love in a world where we have physios and primary cares working alongside each other to create this adjunct physical exam. It just doesn't exist quite yet, at least that I've seen. But I would love it too, and I think there's an opportunity there for sure. Right now it just occurs in separate places.
Last thing, I want to show you guys a video of one of my patients that I've been working with. Her name is Linda, and she had a fall down the stairs last May, okay? And she broke her leg and had some broken ribs, a fracture in her neck, and she was in like an inpatient or a home health kind of setting for PT for 115 days. Okay, rehabbing from this injury. It was pretty intense. She's 85 years old, okay? And so after she was done with this inpatient rehab situation, she actually reached out to me because she felt like, I've been discharged from PT, but I don't feel like I'm where I want to be. I'm still in some pain, and I just am not functioning at the level that I want to be able to function at, okay? And so I started working with her probably last November. And so we have been working together for 8 months. How long is that? 8 months? Yeah. And so I took some videos of some of the exercises that we've been doing, and obviously we did not start here. So please don't think that I took this, this lady and we started at this point. But I want to show you where we have gotten to, knowing that there's going to be some pictures in here of her broken leg and some of her hospital pictures, and then kind of where we are at now and what the type of things are that we are doing. And this is all because she reached out to me and started doing PT, and we have progressed her to this point. And she had a goal to be able to walk to the clinic. It was 0.8 miles. She couldn't do that. We worked on progressive walking, some strength work, and on her 1-year anniversary of her fall, she walked to the clinic for our session. And so it was really, really awesome. And so I just want you guys to take a look at this video. No fitness background. Never has lifted anything ever in her life. Heavy. No music, but silence. It's a 35-pound kettlebell, 18-pound kettlebell.
Is that your facility where she was training?
That's our current facility in Fitchburg. Yes, we are moving. Right now we're off of McKee, and so that's our current facility now. But we're moving into a different space that will have it'll be a little bit bigger for I guess we're out of a CrossFit gym right now, and so that space is just kind of the gym portion of it. And so our new location will be off of Nesbitt, kind of over by the Target in Fitchburg. But it'll have a similar setup with similar machines, similar components and all the things that she was using there. We'll have all of those things.
So you have group sessions in there too, right?
Say again?
Group sessions?
We will, yep. Starting in the fall when we open, we're gonna have 2 days a week, we're gonna have older adults, 55 and older, resistance training classes.
September, you said?
Probably November. Yeah, and then we'll go through the winter and into the spring.
Okay.
Yeah, just because we don't open until November, so I wish we could start in September, but not realistic. But then moving forward, probably the following year we'll try to start in September and go through the winter and into the spring, and then we just take the summers off because people are very busy and more active typically in the summer. So.
What's the name of your facility?
Forward Physical Therapy.
You have literature? You have literature?
Yeah,
Yep.
We always get literature.
So for today's presentation, our goal, we're gonna probably be hanging out at the senior center. Every now and then we're gonna get some other kind of talks set up about nutrition. We don't really like to talk about fall prevention, more of fall preparedness, so how to fall when we do fall, because they're gonna happen. So how do we do that safely, that sort of thing. We're gonna get that set up for you all here. We don't have additional resources just for the One Rep Max Living, but we would be happy to share the presentation so that it can be distributed to you all if you're interested in having that electronically. But then Michelle has some of her business cards here as well if you want to get in touch with her. And we forgot to introduce Shannon. She is one of our administrators. She's hanging out with us, taking pictures and helping support us in any way. So at this point, if there aren't any other questions, we'll be hanging out for a little while. If you want to get your grip strength tested, yeah.
You said talk about our exercise equipment sometime.
Yes,
Tell
yes,
people what to do.
yes.
I asked you when you did the pickleball exercise.
Yep.
about that.
Yes, we will find a time to connect and get some instruction on how to kind of go about the exercise equipment here that you all have already have access to, that has been requested from the pickleball event on Tuesday.
Is this one Max Rep Living a general trademark? Is it your local trademark?
So it is, so the concept of One Rep Max Living was started and created by a physical therapist based out of Kentucky. He teaches older adult classes for individuals 50 and older, and he also teaches other physical therapists and rehab providers across the country on this concept and how they can best kind of treat their patients in order to move them away from that critical threshold line. So it's, we don't have it trademarked, we utilize the information in order to spread the good word about it, but it's not something that we coined or made up.
How long is that one max been out in the public? It's not new, is it?
It's, I think it's a relatively new concept to most folks. But it's more of just putting a term on a thing that has just existed. What do we call it? How do we address something where someone is living at their critical threshold? And it's the concept is similar to what we use in the weightlifting world or exercise world, where we're trying to find a 1 repetition max of a movement. So say a deadlift or a squat. Michelle can deadlift 345 pounds? 375 pounds from the floor. One time, if you ask her to do it twice, she'll run away. But that's kind of where the word came from, and then kind of applying it to the rehab space to kind of get people, instead of getting people back to baseline, it is how do we get you better and beyond, so that, because that person got injured, that person got hurt, how do we get you back to baseline but then also better, so that we can avoid urgent care, ER visits, doctor's office, multiple physical therapy visits, sort of thing.
Is there a risk in this weightlifting world and stuff to trying to find out what your 1 rep max is? I mean, how do you know when things pop?
That's a great question. So if I had someone new to my clinic, if I am not on the first day, unless they are very familiar with lifting weights, saying we are going after your 1 rep max today, I want to see how much you can lift as heavy as possible from the floor. That person probably isn't coming back for the second visit. We can utilize different calculators where we go off of, can you lift this 35-pound weight 5 times, 8 times? Can you do it as many times as possible? And then we can use a calculator to kind of give us an idea of like, how close are we? So if you can lift 10 pounds 10 times, then you could probably hypothetically lift 35 pounds once from the floor. But that, we wouldn't have someone like just show up new to lifting weights and throw a barbell in front of them or a really heavy kettlebell and say, all right, lift it, let's see what happens. I mean, I have done it before, but typically we don't. Because there is a risk in, if we're looking at someone who is not physically able to do their activities of daily living, and then I ask them to do something beyond their threshold, the risk for a musculoskeletal injury is definitely there. And it's there with any sort of physical activity we do, but our goal is to kind of set you up for success, see where you're at, or at least get really close so that the exercise that we prescribe to you is challenging enough, but doable. Great question.
Insurance plans, who do you take, and do you need a?
Yeah, so with Medicare, it does require a physician referral. Oftentimes for people, if they have a good established relationship with their provider, they can either MyChart message for referral to our facility or whatever facility you choose. Or if a physical therapist
writes up their documentation, has some medical necessity they can provide, and then fax it off to your physician, as long as they sign it off, that also functions as a referral. So that's the one way that we can kind of decrease that barrier of having to actually see your physician. Medicare as your primary and most secondary insurances we take. Some of the HMOs, so some Quartz plans, Dean, Mercy Care, those sorts of, they try to keep you within their hospital system, so it's very dependent on the plan that you have. But some of the other like commercial, United Healthcare, Humana, those are ones that we're able to take and run through your insurance. But if it's something that you're questioning or even want to know and wanted us to do a check on your eligibility, we're happy to do that. If anyone wants their grip strength tested, oh yeah, okay. We can come to you. Yeah, we can come to you. Let's do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.